The story of Paul begins on a dusty road under a bright Middle Eastern sun. A man called Saul is marching toward Damascus with a mission in his mind and anger burning in his heart. He believes he is doing the right thing. He believes he is protecting his people. He believes he is serving God. But he is wrong, and he is about to learn that in a way he never saw coming. One moment he is walking with confidence, and the next he is on the ground, blinded by a light stronger than anything he has ever seen. A voice speaks to him. It knows his name, it knows his past, it knows his future, and it changes everything. Before we continue, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment with your thoughts. It really helps us to keep bringing you in-depth stories. Thank you. Now let's dive back in. People remember this moment as the turning point. The moment a man filled with hatred became one of the greatest teachers of love. The moment a persecutor became an apostle. The moment Saul became Paul. But his story does not begin on that road. His story begins in a city where cultures mixed, ideas collided, and the world felt busy and loud. This is where Saul grew up. This is where his mind was shaped, long before the light ever touched his eyes. Saul was born in a place called Tarsus, a city near the southern coast of modern-day Turkey. At that time, it was part of the Roman Empire, and it was known as a place of learning. It was famous for philosophy, trade, and culture. The streets were filled with Greek ideas, Roman laws, and Jewish traditions. It was the kind of place where a child could hear 3 different languages before lunchtime. Saul grew up in this busy world, and it shaped him into someone who understood how different cultures think and live. He was born into a Jewish family from the tribe of Benjamin. His parents raised him with strong faith and strong rules. From a young age, he learned the scriptures, the laws, the stories of his people. These stories formed the foundation of his world. They taught him discipline. They taught him loyalty. They taught him that God's law mattered more than anything else. This belief stayed with him even when he grew older and traveled far from home. He was also a Roman citizen because of his family's status, which gave him rights many Jews did not have. This meant he could travel freely. He could speak in courts. He could move through parts of the empire that were closed to others. Later in life, this citizenship would protect him from danger, but he did not know that yet. At this point, he was simply a young man eager to learn and eager to defend what he believed. Saul's parents sent him to Jerusalem to study under a respected teacher named Gamaliel. Gamaliel was known for wisdom and patience. People trusted his judgment. Under him, Saul studied the law in great detail. He memorized long passages. He learned how to argue, how to debate, how to defend his beliefs. And he became very good at it. He became so passionate about the law that he believed anyone who broke it was an enemy of God. This passion grew stronger when he heard about a new group of people spreading a new message. They spoke about a man named Jesus. They said Jesus was the promised Messiah. They said he had risen from the dead. They gathered in homes. They prayed in public, and they welcomed anyone. It didn't matter if someone was rich or poor, Jew or Gentile. Everyone was invited. This angered Saul. To him, this new group was dangerous. He believed they were leading people away from the truth. He believed they were twisting the law he loved. So he made it his mission to stop them. People feared Saul. They saw him as unstoppable. He traveled from house to house, dragging believers into prisons. He stood by when Stephen, the first recorded Christian martyr, was killed by stones. The men who threw the stones placed their coats at Saul's feet. That small detail has always felt meaningful. It suggests Saul was not just watching. He was part of the moment. He approved of it. He believed Stephen deserved it. In his mind, he was doing God's work. He believed he was protecting his people. And it is worth asking a simple question here. How many people in history have hurt others while believing they were doing something good? The answer is many. And Saul was one of them. He had the right intentions, but the wrong understanding. He had knowledge, but no compassion. At one point, he asked for letters from the high priest so he could travel to Damascus and arrest more followers of Jesus. Damascus was far from Jerusalem. Traveling there was a commitment. The journey took days. It required planning, resources, and determination. Saul was willing to give all of that because he was convinced he was in the right. This is the version of Saul the world knew at the time. A strict Pharisee, a deep thinker, a man who kept rules tightly and judged anyone who did not. A man whose confidence came from his own understanding of God's law. And it is important to hold this image in your mind because it makes what happens next even more powerful. One of the most interesting things about Saul's early life is that he had everything a young Jewish man could want. He had education, status, and respect. He had a clear path toward influence. He could have become a respected leader in Jerusalem. He could have lived a quiet life of study and prayer. But his story was not meant to be quiet. His story was meant to shake the world. To understand Saul before Damascus, imagine someone today who defends their beliefs with passion, refuses to listen to other views, and sees disagreement as a threat. That person might be educated, sincere, and even kind in other areas, yet driven by fear of losing what they hold dear. Saul was like that. He held the law so tightly that he could not see the possibility of something new. He could not imagine a Messiah who suffered. He could not imagine a message that welcomed Gentiles. To him, the new followers of Jesus were breaking everything he believed was sacred. As he prepared for his journey to Damascus, he likely felt proud. He believed he was ready to stop this movement before it spread further. He believed he was doing the world a favor. But life has a way of surprising us when we think we know everything. And Saul was about to face a surprise that would change not only his life, but the lives of millions of people after him. Before we move to the next chapter, it is helpful to picture Saul as a young man who thought he was building his future, only to discover that his future was waiting for him somewhere he did not expect. He thought he would spend his life defending the law. Instead, he would spend his life sharing grace. He thought he understood God. Instead, God was about to show him a truth he never imagined. Saul was walking toward Damascus as one kind of man. He would leave the city as someone entirely different. Saul set out for Damascus with confidence. He wasn't sneaking out in the night or hiding who he was. He believed he had authority. He believed he had a mission blessed by the leaders of his community. The letters he carried gave him the power to arrest followers of Jesus and bring them back to Jerusalem. He was proud of these letters. They proved he was trusted. They proved he was committed. They proved he was someone who would defend the faith at any cost. The road to Damascus was long and dry. The landscape was filled with pale, rocky hills, scattered shrubs, and stretches of open land that seemed to go on forever. The sun hit hard during the day. The nights grew cold. Traveling this road wasn't pleasant, but Saul didn't mind. His mind was focused. His heart was hard. He had one goal. He wanted to stop the followers of Jesus from spreading their message any further. But something unexpected was waiting on that road. Something that would break through his certainty, stop his anger, and change everything he believed. It happened during the daytime. Saul and the men traveling with him were probably tired and dusty. The journey wasn't short, but just as they approached the city, something happened that none of them were prepared for. A light suddenly surrounded Saul. Not just any light. This was a light brighter than the sun, brighter than anything their eyes had ever seen. It wasn't warm or soft. It didn't look like sunlight reflecting off a stone. It was overwhelming. It consumed the entire moment. It forced Saul to fall to the ground. Everything he thought he controlled slipped away in an instant. While he lay there, unable to see anything around him, a voice spoke. It cut through the silence with clear and direct words. It said, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" The voice knew his name. It knew his actions, and it spoke like someone with authority. Saul's heart must have been pounding. His whole world was shaking. He asked the only question he could think of in that moment. "Who are you, Lord?" And the answer changed his life. The voice said, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." Imagine what those words did to Saul's mind. He had believed Jesus was gone. He had believed the followers of Jesus were lying or confused. He had believed he was protecting the truth. But now the truth was speaking to him, not through a dream or a whisper or a rumor. The truth was standing right in front of him, wrapped in a light that left him blind. The men traveling with Saul heard a sound too, but they didn't see what Saul saw. They didn't understand what was happening. They could only watch as their leader lay on the ground, struck down by a power none of them could describe. When the light faded, Saul opened his eyes, but he couldn't see anything. His sight was gone. Everything around him was dark. The world he once understood had disappeared. The man who once walked with confidence now had to be guided by the hand like a child. His companions led him into Damascus, one slow step at a time. For 3 days, Saul stayed blind. He didn't eat or drink. He stayed in silence, trying to understand what had happened. Imagine the thoughts running through his mind. He had spent years attacking people who followed Jesus. Now Jesus had spoken to him by name. He had spent years believing he was on the right path. Now that path had disappeared. He had spent years using his eyes to judge others. Now he didn't even have the use of his eyes. Sometimes life forces us to stop. It forces us to sit in silence. It forces us to look at ourselves without distractions. Saul was in one of those moments. The man who knew everything now knew nothing. The man who judged others now had to wait for help. The man who believed he understood God now realized God might be doing something far bigger than he had ever imagined. While Saul sat blind in Damascus, something else was happening in the same city. A follower of Jesus named Ananias was praying. Ananias was a faithful man. He believed in the message of Jesus, but he also knew who Saul was. Saul had a reputation, and it wasn't good. Everyone knew that Saul had come to Damascus to find people like Ananias and throw them into prison. During his prayer, Ananias received a message. The Lord told him to go to a house on a street called Straight Street and find Saul. He was told Saul was praying. He was told Saul had seen a vision of a man coming to restore his sight. This message must have shocked Ananias. He even spoke his fear out loud. He said he had heard about Saul and all the harm he had done. But the Lord told Ananias something important. He said Saul was chosen for a purpose. He would carry the message of Jesus to Gentiles, to kings, and to the people of Israel. He would suffer for this mission. This was not a small calling. This was a calling that would shape the future of the early church. Ananias obeyed, even though he was afraid. He walked to the house where Saul was staying. He entered the room, and he saw Saul sitting there in darkness, waiting for something he didn't fully understand. Ananias placed his hands on him and spoke simple, powerful words. He called him Brother Saul. That one word, brother, must have softened Saul's heart. It was a word of acceptance, a word of forgiveness, a word of hope. Immediately, something like scales fell from Saul's eyes. His sight returned. The darkness lifted. He could see again, but the world looked different now. He was different now. The anger that once filled him had been replaced with something new: understanding, humility, hope. Saul was baptized soon after. He ate again. His strength came back, and almost immediately he began speaking about Jesus. The same voice he once used to attack believers, he now used to defend them. The same passion he once used to persecute, he now used to preach. This sudden change shocked people. Some didn't trust him. Some thought it was a trap. Others were confused. How could a man like Saul become a follower of Jesus so quickly? But Saul didn't care about their doubt. He knew what he had seen on the road. He knew what he had heard. And he knew he had a new purpose. One of the interesting things about this moment in Saul's life is how quickly everything changed. A single encounter shifted his entire direction. And this is something many people can relate to. Sometimes one moment, one event, one conversation, one wake-up call can turn a life upside down. Sometimes the very thing we think we understand becomes the thing we question. Saul's story reminds us that change can come at any time and from any place. This part of the story feels powerful because it shows something that goes beyond religion. It shows that people can change. It shows that even the hardest heart can soften. It shows that mistakes do not have to define a person forever. Saul had become known for violence and fear, but in one moment, everything changed. And this change didn't come because someone argued with him. It didn't come because someone threatened him. It came because truth met him directly. There is something striking about the fact that Saul was blinded. It is almost symbolic. He thought he saw the truth, but he didn't. When he lost his sight, he began to see more clearly than ever before. Many people go through moments like that. Sometimes losing something forces us to realize what we were missing. Sometimes stepping away from our comfort forces us to look inward. When Saul finally regained his sight, he didn't go back to who he was. He couldn't. The old Saul had been left on that road. A new man had walked into Damascus. Saul's story on the road to Damascus remains one of the most dramatic turning points in the Bible. It is the moment that transformed history. Without this moment, the letters he later wrote might never have existed. The churches he visited might never have been formed. The teachings that shaped Christianity might never have reached the world. And all of it began with a bright light, a voice calling his name, and a man sitting in darkness waiting for a new beginning. When Saul regained his sight in Damascus, he stepped into a world that suddenly felt unfamiliar. He had walked into the city with authority and anger. Now he walked with humility and a new sense of purpose. People who saw him in the streets didn't know what to make of him. Some stepped aside, unsure if he was still the same man who had come to arrest them. Others kept their distance, whispering behind him. But Saul wasn't focused on how people saw him. He was focused on the truth he had learned. He stayed in Damascus for several days, talking with believers who had once been afraid of him. He listened to their stories. He asked questions. He prayed with them. And day by day, he began to understand the message he had once tried to destroy. He began to see Jesus not as an enemy of the law, but as the fulfillment of everything he had studied since childhood. It didn't take long for Saul to begin speaking publicly. He went to the synagogues where Jewish men gathered to study Scripture. He stood up among men who knew him only as a persecutor, and he said something they never expected to hear from him. He said that Jesus is the Son of God. You can imagine the looks in the room: confusion, shock, suspicion. This was the same man who had chased believers across cities, and now he was defending the very message he once hated. This sudden change caused a stir. People couldn't explain it. Some wondered if Saul had lost his mind. Others suspected a trick. But Saul didn't stop. He spoke with passion and clarity. He used the scriptures he had memorized under Gamaliel. He connected old prophecies to the life of Jesus. He explained how the Messiah had been promised long before. People listened, even if they didn't agree. They listened because Saul spoke with conviction. As more people heard him, discussions spread across Damascus. Some were impressed. Some were angry. Some felt threatened. The religious leaders who once saw Saul as an ally now saw him as a problem. His voice was too strong. His arguments were too clear. His change was too public. They began to talk about silencing him. Saul learned something important during these early weeks. When you change, not everyone will change with you. Some will question your motives. Some will refuse to trust you. Some will attack you for stepping away from the path they wanted you to stay on. Saul faced all of this immediately, but he stayed committed. Eventually, a group of men began planning to kill him. The gates of the city were guarded day and night. There was no safe way out. Anyone who tried to help him risked their own life. But the believers in Damascus refused to leave him. They found a solution that sounds almost simple, yet was incredibly brave. They placed Saul in a large basket, lowered him down the city wall at night, and helped him escape quietly. Imagine this moment. The man who once marched with confidence now had to flee in silence, hidden in a basket, trusting others to keep him alive. It was a humbling experience, but it also showed how deeply the community had embraced him. After leaving Damascus, Saul traveled to Arabia for a period of time. The Bible doesn't give many details about this. Scholars have debated what he did there. Some say he preached. Others believe he reflected and prayed. Many think he spent that time rethinking everything he had learned, reshaping his understanding of God's plan. What we know for sure is that this time away helped him grow. When he returned to Damascus later, he returned with even deeper strength. But Saul knew he couldn't avoid Jerusalem forever. It was the center of Jewish life. It was where the apostles lived. It was where the message of Jesus had begun. So after 3 years, he made his way there. Walking into Jerusalem must have been one of the hardest moments of his life. People recognized him. They remembered the fear he had caused. Some believers didn't trust him. They didn't know if he was truly changed or simply pretending to get close to them. He tried to join the disciples, but they were afraid. They didn't believe he was genuine. And to be honest, their fear made sense. Saul had been a threat. He had hurt real people. Change is possible, but healing takes time. Trust must be rebuilt. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past overnight. Then something important happened. A man named Barnabas stepped forward. Barnabas was known for his kindness and strong faith. He listened to Saul. He heard his story, and he believed him. Barnabas brought Saul to the apostles. He explained how Saul had seen the Lord on the road and how he had preached boldly in Damascus. Without Barnabas, Saul might have been pushed aside. With him, Saul found acceptance. This moment teaches a powerful lesson. Sometimes it only takes one person to believe in us when everyone else doubts. One person who sees our change. One person who gives us a chance. Barnabas was that person for Saul. He opened the door that others were afraid to open. Saul stayed in Jerusalem for a while. He preached with confidence. He debated with Greek-speaking Jews. He spoke boldly about Jesus. But once again, his words caused tension, and soon a group began plotting to kill him. His life was in danger again. The believers decided it was time for him to leave. They took him to the port city of Caesarea and sent him back to Tarsus, his hometown. This wasn't a punishment, it was protection. For a long time after this, Saul lived away from Jerusalem. The Bible doesn't describe this period in detail. Historians believe he continued teaching and growing. He may have preached in Tarsus and the surrounding regions. He may have worked as a tent maker to support himself. He may have spent hours in prayer, building the understanding he would later share with the world. While Saul was away, the early church kept growing. More Gentiles began to believe. More communities formed. And this is where Saul's next important chapter begins. One day, Barnabas traveled to a city called Antioch, where many new believers were gathering. He saw that the work was too much for one person. He needed help. And he remembered Saul. He traveled to Tarsus, found him, and brought him to Antioch. This choice changed everything. Barnabas didn't just give Saul a second chance in Jerusalem. He gave him a place to grow, to lead, and to prepare for the mission that lay ahead. Saul spent a full year in Antioch, teaching large crowds. The city was a mix of cultures and ideas, much like Tarsus. It was the perfect place for Saul to speak to both Jews and Gentiles. This was where the word Christian was first used to describe followers of Jesus, and Saul was right in the middle of that moment. These years shaped Saul in ways that set the foundation for his future. He gained experience as a teacher. He learned how to speak to people from different backgrounds. He saw how the message of Jesus could bring strangers together. He understood that the faith he once tried to destroy was now growing in ways he had never imagined. As you listen to Saul's early ministry, you can feel the transformation happening inside him. He didn't become a leader overnight. He didn't gain trust instantly. He didn't change without challenges. His new path came with danger, rejection, confusion, and risk. But he kept moving. He kept learning. He kept growing. This part of Saul's story shows something important. Change is not a single moment. It begins with a moment, but it becomes real through choices. Saul chose to speak even when people doubted him. He chose to trust God even when he didn't know the outcome. He chose to walk away from comfort, security, and his old identity because he knew the truth was worth it. The man who once stood by while Stephen was stoned now risked his own life to spread the message of Jesus. That is transformation. That is growth. That is what shaped Saul into the man the world would later call Paul. When the church in Antioch grew stronger, something important happened during a time of prayer and fasting. The believers sensed that Saul and Barnabas had a calling that went beyond their city. They were meant to travel. They were meant to reach new places. They were meant to share the message of Jesus with people who had never heard it before. So the church laid hands on them, prayed for them, and sent them out. This moment marks the beginning of Paul's missionary journeys. And from this point on, Saul would begin using the name Paul more often, especially among Gentiles who were more familiar with Roman names. Paul's first journey began by sea. He and Barnabas sailed to Cyprus, an island filled with busy ports, Roman officials, farmers, and merchants. The island had temples dedicated to Roman gods and people followed a mix of beliefs. When Paul arrived, he didn't hide his message. He preached in synagogues and spoke with anyone willing to listen. One of the most memorable moments happened when they met the Roman governor, Sergius Paulus. The governor wanted to hear Paul's message, but a sorcerer named Elymas tried to stop him. Paul confronted Elymas and exposed his lies. The governor saw the truth and believed. This moment showed that Paul's mission wasn't just for everyday people. His message could reach leaders as well. After Cyprus, Paul and Barnabas traveled north toward a region called Galatia. These were rugged areas with mountain roads and unpredictable weather. Traveling wasn't comfortable. There were dangers from bandits, wild animals, sickness, and unstable food supplies. But Paul kept going. He wasn't interested in comfort. He was focused on reaching people. In the towns of Galatia, Paul preached in synagogues first. Some Jews listened and welcomed the message. Others rejected it strongly. When people rejected him, Paul didn't argue endlessly. He simply turned to the Gentiles. Many of them welcomed the message with open hearts. But as the number of believers grew, opposition grew as well. In one city called Lystra, Paul healed a man who had been crippled from birth. The crowd was amazed. They thought Paul and Barnabas were gods in human form. They brought animals to sacrifice to them. Paul was horrified. He tore his clothes and begged them to stop. He explained that he was just a man and that all glory belonged to God alone. The crowd listened for a moment, but soon trouble stirred again. Some opponents convinced the people to turn against Paul. The same crowd that wanted to honor him now threw stones at him. They dragged him out of the city, thinking he was dead. But Paul wasn't finished. When the disciples gathered around him, he got up. He walked back into the city. This moment shows Paul's determination. He wasn't fearless because he was strong. He was fearless because he trusted his mission. He believed that people needed to hear the message, no matter the cost. After finishing their work in Galatia, Paul and Barnabas returned to Antioch to report everything that had happened. The church celebrated with them. But Paul wasn't done. He knew more people needed to hear the message. He knew more places needed to be reached. During his second missionary journey, Paul traveled with a new companion named Silas. Barnabas went on a different mission, but Paul continued forward. This journey would take him even further, into areas that would become central to Christian history. One of the first major stops on this second journey was a city called Philippi. Philippi was a Roman colony filled with retired soldiers, merchants, and families. It was a place with strong Roman influence. When Paul arrived, he looked for a synagogue, but it seemed there wasn't one. Instead, he found a group of women gathered by a river, praying. One of them was Lydia, a seller of purple cloth. She was wealthy, respected, and known for her generosity. Paul sat with the group, spoke to them, and Lydia listened with an open heart. She became the first recorded convert in Europe. She opened her home to the believers, and her home became the first Christian meeting place in that region. But trouble soon followed. Paul cast a spirit out of a young girl who was being used by her owners to make money through fortune-telling. When the owners realized their profits were gone, they dragged Paul and Silas before the authorities. The crowd joined the attack. Paul and Silas were beaten, stripped, and thrown into a prison. Their feet were locked in stocks. The prison was dark, cold, and uncomfortable. But Paul didn't complain. He didn't give up. Instead, he prayed and sang hymns with Silas. The other prisoners listened. Even in pain, Paul showed hope. Then an earthquake shook the prison. The doors opened. The chains fell off. The jailer woke up and panicked. He thought the prisoners had escaped, and he believed he would be punished. He lifted his sword to take his own life, but Paul called out to him. He told him not to harm himself because everyone was still there. The jailer was shaken by this mercy. He knew something powerful was happening. He fell before Paul and Silas and asked how he could be saved. Paul spoke to him simply and directly. The jailer took them to his home. He washed their wounds. His whole family listened to the message and believed. They were baptized before sunrise. This moment shows Paul's heart. He didn't use the earthquake as a chance to run. He used it as a chance to save someone. He cared about the jailer's life more than his own freedom. That is the kind of man Paul was becoming. After Philippi, Paul traveled to Thessalonica. He preached in the synagogue, and many people believed, including a group of Greeks and influential women. But some leaders became jealous. They stirred up a mob and searched for Paul. Paul had to leave secretly at night. He traveled to Berea next. The people there were different. They listened carefully and checked the scriptures for themselves. Paul enjoyed teaching them. But trouble soon followed again from Thessalonica. Paul moved on to Athens, leaving Silas and Timothy behind. Athens was a city filled with ideas. Philosophers debated in open squares. People followed different gods and traditions. Paul walked through the city and saw altars everywhere. One altar was dedicated to an unknown god. Paul used this as a starting point. He told the people that the God they worshipped without knowing had now revealed himself through Jesus. Some people mocked him, some laughed, but others wanted to hear more. Paul didn't try to impress them with fancy words. He spoke with honesty. He spoke with clarity. That is how he always taught. After Athens, Paul arrived in Corinth, a busy city filled with wealth, trade, and immorality. It was a city where people chased pleasure without thinking about the cost. Paul stayed there for a long time, teaching and guiding a growing group of believers. He made tents during the day to support himself. He spent his evenings teaching. During his time in Corinth, he met Aquila and Priscilla, a married couple who became some of his closest partners. Corinth was a challenging place, but it was also a place where Paul's faith grew stronger. Paul's third missionary journey focused heavily on a city called Ephesus. Ephesus was famous for the Temple of Artemis, one of the wonders of the ancient world. People traveled from far away to worship there. Magic, spiritual rituals, and idol-making businesses were common. Paul preached in the synagogue at first, but when resistance grew, he moved to a lecture hall. For 2 years, he taught there daily. The message spread across the region. Many people who once practiced magic brought their books and burned them publicly. This was no small event. These books were worth large sums of money, but people were willing to give them up because they had found something greater. Paul's work in Ephesus upset the idol makers. One silversmith named Demetrius gathered his fellow craftsmen. He argued that Paul was ruining their business by convincing people to stop worshiping Artemis. A massive riot broke out. People flooded the streets, shouting and demanding action. Paul wanted to go speak to the crowd, but the believers stopped him. They feared for his life. It took hours for the city officials to calm everyone. This riot showed how powerful Paul's message had become. It didn't just change hearts. It changed communities. It shook old systems. It challenged old ways of thinking. And when old systems shake, people who benefit from them often push back. As Paul continued his travels, he strengthened churches, trained leaders, wrote letters, and encouraged believers facing persecution. His journeys took him across mountains, seas, deserts, and dangerous paths. He faced sickness, shipwrecks, beatings, and hunger. But he never gave up. He believed the message he carried was worth every risk. In each city he visited, Paul built relationships. He listened to people's struggles. He celebrated their growth. He corrected their mistakes gently but firmly. He guided them like a father guides his children. His letters show this clearly. They are filled with love, hope, and practical advice. One of the most powerful things about Paul's journeys is how human they feel. Paul wasn't a superhero. He faced fear, pain, disappointment, and rejection. But he kept moving. He believed that even one person hearing the truth made every hardship worthwhile. These journeys shaped early Christianity. Without Paul's steps across dusty roads and stormy seas, many of the churches that exist today would never have begun. His teaching helped people understand how to live with faith in a world filled with challenges. Paul knew his mission wasn't finished yet. The road ahead would become even more difficult. Trouble was building in Jerusalem, and soon Paul would face trials, imprisonment, and a final journey that would take him to the heart of the Roman Empire. When Paul traveled from city to city, he couldn't stay in one place long enough to guide every new group of believers through all the questions they had. People were learning a new way of life, a new way of relating to God, and a new way of treating one another. They needed direction. They needed answers. They needed encouragement. So Paul began to write letters. These letters were not meant to become famous. They were meant to help real people in real situations. But over time, they became some of the most influential writings in history. Paul's letters, often called epistles, were written to communities he loved deeply. They show his heart, his personality, and his struggles. They also show how much he cared for every single person who followed the message of Jesus. Even when he was far away, even when he was exhausted, even when he faced danger, he always took time to write, explain, teach, and remind people that they were not alone. One of the first letters Paul wrote was to the churches in Galatia. These believers had come from many backgrounds. Some were Jews, some were Gentiles. They had all accepted the message of Jesus with excitement. But after Paul left, some teachers came in and told the Gentile believers they had to follow certain Jewish customs to be accepted by God. This created confusion and fear. So Paul wrote with strong emotion. He told them they were saved by faith, not by religious rituals. He reminded them that Jesus had set them free. He explained that rules alone could not change hearts. This letter shows Paul's protective side. He wrote like a parent trying to keep his children from slipping into danger. Another important letter is Romans. Paul wrote it to believers in the city of Rome, a place he had not yet visited. This letter is rich with teaching about grace, forgiveness, and the nature of sin. Paul explained that all people, Jews and Gentiles, stand equal before God. He said that everyone has failed in some way, but everyone has access to forgiveness through Jesus. He used simple yet powerful images. He described sin as something that crawls into human life, something that breaks relationships and leaves people empty. But he also described grace as something even bigger, something that restores what is broken. One of the most famous ideas from Romans is that nothing can separate us from the love of God. That message has comforted people for centuries. In Corinth, Paul dealt with a different kind of challenge. The city was busy, wealthy, and filled with distractions. The believers there struggled with arguments, pride, and moral problems. Paul wrote 2 long letters to guide them. In one of these letters, he described love in a way that remains timeless. He said, "Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It doesn't brag. It doesn't keep a list of wrongs." People still read these words at weddings and gatherings today. But when Paul first wrote them, he wasn't trying to be poetic. He was trying to heal a broken community. He wrote these words to remind people that faith was not just an idea. It was a way of living. Paul's letters also show his honesty. He didn't hide his pain or struggles. In one letter, he wrote that he had been beaten, imprisoned, stoned, shipwrecked, and attacked by robbers. He said he had faced sleepless nights, hunger, and cold. He admitted he felt pressure and anxiety for the churches. This honesty makes Paul's voice real. He wasn't pretending to be strong. He showed that he was human. He showed that following his mission came with real cost. In his letters to the Thessalonians, Paul wrote with warmth. They were young believers who faced persecution. They needed comfort. Paul encouraged them, reminding them that their suffering had meaning and that they had a community that stood with them. He spoke like a friend who wanted to lift their spirits and help them keep going. One thing people notice about Paul's writing is how practical it is. He didn't just talk about big ideas. He wrote about everyday life. He wrote about how to treat neighbors, how to forgive, how to deal with anger, how to support one another, how to resist temptation, how to stay peaceful in difficult times. His words were full of real advice people could use in their daily routines. For example, Paul told believers to rejoice even in small things. He told them not to grow tired of doing good. He encouraged them to speak with kindness and to be patient with one another. These simple instructions still feel relevant today. When life gets stressful, these words remind us to reset our perspective. Paul also wrote about the importance of community. He explained that every person has unique gifts. Some teach, some encourage, some help, some serve quietly. He compared the community to a body where each part plays a vital role. This idea became central to how early believers saw themselves. It helped them realize that no one was useless and everyone mattered. His letter to the Ephesians is filled with teachings about unity. Paul encouraged Jews and Gentiles to see themselves as one family. This message was radical at the time. People from different cultures rarely mixed. But Paul believed that faith brought people together across all barriers. He said that peace was built not through force, but through love and understanding. In his letters to Timothy and Titus, Paul wrote as a mentor. These letters have a different tone. They feel more personal. Timothy and Titus were young leaders who often faced pressure and responsibility. Paul encouraged them to stay strong, to lead with integrity, and to teach others with gentleness. He treated them like sons. He guided them with wisdom gained through years of experience. One of the most touching parts of Paul's writings appears in his letter to the Philippians. Paul wrote this while he was in prison. Yet the letter is filled with joy. He spoke about contentment, saying he had learned to be satisfied whether he had plenty or little. He wrote that peace comes from trusting God, not from circumstances. One of his most famous lines encourages believers to think about things that are true, noble, and pure. This wasn't empty advice. It was guidance from a man writing from a dark prison cell, choosing hope over despair. Paul's letters often include greetings to individuals. These small details show that he remembered people by name. He cared about their stories. He valued relationships. Even while traveling or suffering, he never forgot the people who walked with him. What makes Paul's writing powerful is the balance between strength and tenderness. He challenged people to grow, but he never forgot compassion. He urged believers to stand firm in their faith, but he also reminded them that everyone makes mistakes. His letters are both firm and gentle. They tell the truth without crushing the spirit. Paul also wrote about freedom, not freedom from responsibility, but freedom from fear and guilt. He believed that faith should set people free from shame and give them confidence to live with purpose. This message resonated deeply with people who had felt weighed down by religion or expectations. Another theme in Paul's letters is hope. He reminded people that suffering was not the end of their story. He spoke of a future filled with restoration and renewal. This hope helped believers endure hardships. It gave them strength to face challenges with courage. As Paul continued writing, he shaped the beliefs of early Christian communities. His letters were read aloud in gatherings. People discussed them, copied them, and shared them with other cities. Over time, these letters helped unify the early church. They provided a foundation for teaching, guidance, and community life. Paul didn't know these letters would one day be part of the Bible. He wrote them because he cared. He wrote them because people needed help. He wrote them because he had seen how transformative his encounter with Jesus had been, and he wanted others to understand that same truth. When you read his letters today, you can feel the depth of his heart. You can sense the weight he carried. You can see the growth in his own understanding as the years passed. You can hear the voice of a man who walked thousands of miles, faced countless dangers, and still wrote with warmth and patience. Paul's letters continue to influence millions of people. They have shaped sermons, conversations, music, prayers, and personal reflections for centuries. And they remain powerful because they are grounded in real human experience. Paul did not write from a comfortable place. He wrote from prisons, storms, deserts, and busy cities. His words were tested by life. They were shaped by hardship. They were softened by compassion. As we move deeper into Paul's story, his letters become even more meaningful. They reveal not only his theology, but also his heart. A heart shaped by grace. A heart shaped by sacrifice. A heart shaped by a mission that gave him purpose. Paul knew that his journey would not get easier. Trouble was waiting for him in Jerusalem, but he chose to go anyway. He believed that his calling was more important than comfort. As Paul's influence grew, so did the resistance around him. His message brought hope to many, but it also brought tension. It is easy to imagine the joy in the gatherings where people shared meals, prayed, and learned together. But outside those rooms, beyond those walls, real conflict was building. Change always brings pressure. Paul was stepping into spaces where old traditions held deep roots. And when something new enters a world built on old habits, the ground begins to shake. The biggest source of conflict was this simple question: do Gentile believers need to follow Jewish customs to be accepted by God? For centuries, Jewish identity was connected to specific laws and practices. Circumcision, dietary rules, holy days, and many rituals had shaped the way people lived and worshipped. These traditions were more than rules. They were part of people's identity. So when Gentiles began following Jesus without taking on these customs, many Jewish believers struggled. They wondered if the faith was becoming too loose, too open, too different from what they knew. Paul believed that Gentiles didn't have to become Jews to follow Jesus. He believed faith was enough. He believed the heart mattered more than rituals. This message was refreshing for Gentiles, but challenging for some Jewish believers. And that tension reached a boiling point. In a moment that Paul later wrote about with honesty, he described a situation in the city of Antioch where he confronted Peter. Peter was one of Jesus' closest disciples. He was respected, admired, and trusted. At first, Peter ate with Gentile believers, treating them as equals. But when some strict Jewish believers arrived from Jerusalem, Peter pulled away. He stopped eating with the Gentiles. Other Jewish believers copied him. The room became divided. People were watching. Feelings were hurt. Old walls that Jesus had torn down were being built again. Paul couldn't stay silent. He confronted Peter publicly. He told him that his actions were sending the wrong message. He said unity mattered more than old habits. It was a tense moment, but an important one. Paul wasn't afraid to challenge even the most respected leaders if he believed the truth was at stake. This wasn't the only controversy Paul faced. In nearly every city he visited, people questioned his authority. Some said he wasn't a real apostle. They argued that he didn't walk with Jesus during his earthly ministry. They claimed his message was too bold, too different, too free. These accusations hurt Paul deeply. He wrote about them with emotion in several letters. He defended his calling, not out of pride, but because he cared about the communities he had helped build. He didn't want people to be misled. He wanted them to understand that his ministry came from a real encounter with Jesus, not from human approval. Paul also faced pressure from local authorities. In places where his message disrupted idol-making businesses or challenged local religious customs, political leaders stepped in. In some cities, mobs chased him out. In others, he was questioned, beaten, or thrown into jail. Each time, he got back up. Each time, he kept going. He said he was compelled by love, compelled by truth, compelled by the mission placed inside him. Another challenge Paul faced was his own physical weakness. In one of his letters, he mentioned something he called a thorn in the flesh. He didn't explain exactly what it was. Some think it was a physical illness. Others think it was poor eyesight. Some believe it was emotional or spiritual struggle. Whatever it was, it reminded him of his humanity. It reminded him that even strong people have limits. He prayed for it to be taken away. But he said the answer he received was this: "My grace is enough for you." Paul accepted this. He learned to rely not on his strength, but on God's. As the communities grew, disagreements grew too. Some believers debated endlessly about small rules. Others argued about leadership. Some struggled with old temptations. Paul stepped in through his letters, calming arguments, guiding decisions, and reminding people of the heart of the message. He urged unity. He encouraged patience. He reminded them that they were part of something bigger than their personal disputes. Paul was also concerned about false teachers. These were people who claimed authority, but twisted the message for their own gain. They added burdens that Jesus never asked for. They confused believers, especially new ones. Paul wrote passionately against these influences. He urged communities to stay anchored, to test teachings carefully, to hold on to the truth. Despite all these challenges, the most difficult pressure came from Jerusalem. The religious leaders there still viewed Paul with suspicion. They heard stories of Gentiles joining the faith in large numbers. They heard reports that Paul told people they didn't have to follow certain laws. These rumors made them angry. They saw Paul as someone who was undermining their traditions. When Paul traveled back to Jerusalem later in his life, this tension would explode into violence. But before we reach that moment, it's important to see the human side of Paul. He wasn't a man who created conflict for the sake of attention. He wasn't trying to destroy tradition. He was trying to guide people through change. And change always brings discomfort. He was patient with people who struggled. He gave them space to learn. He encouraged them when they stumbled. He offered hope when they felt lost. But he refused to let fear stop progress. He knew that if he backed down, whole communities would suffer. One powerful example of Paul's heart appears in a moment where he expressed his deep concern for the churches. He said he carried them like a weight on his shoulders every day, not a burden he hated, but a responsibility he embraced. He worried when they struggled. He celebrated when they grew. He felt joy when they stood firm. He felt sorrow when they drifted. His letters show this emotional connection. They show late-night thoughts, early morning reflections, and words written with love, frustration, hope, and urgency. Paul wasn't perfect. He admitted his faults. He wrote that he sometimes did the very things he didn't want to do. He said he wrestled with his old self. This honesty made him relatable. It made him human. It made believers feel that if Paul could struggle and still keep going, they could too. As pressure increased, Paul's conviction grew stronger. He wasn't afraid of opposition. He believed the message he carried was worth every bruise, every insult, every sleepless night. He believed that truth was stronger than tradition. He believed that unity was stronger than division. He believed that new life was possible for anyone, no matter their past. This chapter of Paul's life teaches a simple yet powerful lesson. When you stand for something important, you will face resistance. People will question you. Some will misunderstand you. Some will criticize you. But growth often comes through conflict. Strength comes through pressure. And transformation comes through perseverance. Paul continued moving forward, even as the path grew darker. He knew he would soon face trials that would test him more than ever before. He knew Jerusalem would not welcome him, but he didn't run from danger. He walked toward it, not recklessly, but faithfully. Because the next part of his journey would take him into prisons, courtrooms, storms, and moments where his life hung by a thread. As Paul continued his work, he felt a growing pull to return to Jerusalem. Many friends tried to stop him. They warned him that danger was waiting. They told him the authorities were angry, and the city was full of people who believed he was destroying their traditions. But Paul felt certain he needed to go. He believed his mission wasn't about comfort. It was about obedience. So he packed his things, said his goodbyes, and set his face toward the place where everything had begun. When Paul arrived in Jerusalem, the atmosphere was tense. Some believers welcomed him warmly, grateful to see him after so many years. Others watched him quietly, unsure of how the larger Jewish community would react. Paul met with James and other leaders of the church. They shared news about how thousands of people in the city had believed in Jesus, but they also warned Paul. They said many people had heard rumors that he was teaching Jews to turn away from their customs. These rumors weren't true, but rumors can spread quickly. They can ruin trust. They can build walls between people who should stand together. To help calm the tension, Paul agreed to join some men who were completing a Jewish vow. He entered the temple with them to show he respected Jewish traditions, but his presence didn't go unnoticed. A group of men from Asia recognized him. They shouted accusations. They claimed Paul had brought Gentiles into the sacred area of the temple, which was forbidden. The crowd turned angry almost instantly. People rushed at Paul. They dragged him out of the temple. They beat him, shouting and pushing, their anger rising like a wave. Just when it seemed Paul might be killed, Roman soldiers heard the noise and stormed into the crowd. They grabbed Paul, not to punish him, but to protect him from being torn apart. The soldiers carried him into the fortress. As they climbed the steps, Paul asked for permission to speak to the crowd. Even after being beaten, even after being nearly killed, he wanted to address the people. He wanted them to hear the truth from his own mouth. Paul stood on the steps and told his story. He spoke about his upbringing, his training under Gamaliel, his past as a persecutor, and his encounter on the road to Damascus. He explained how everything changed when Jesus spoke to him. The crowd listened at first, but when he mentioned that God had sent him to bring the message to Gentiles, the anger flared again. The soldiers had to pull him inside to keep him safe. This moment shows Paul's courage. He didn't hide his past. He didn't soften the truth. He spoke openly, even when the crowd was ready to hurt him again. His honesty revealed the depth of his conviction. The soldiers prepared to question Paul by force, which was common practice. But Paul said something that changed the situation. He mentioned he was a Roman citizen. The soldiers froze. Roman citizens had legal rights that protected them from being beaten or questioned without a trial. The commander realized Paul had to be treated with respect. This citizenship, which Paul had carried since birth, now became a shield that protected his life. The next day, Paul was brought before the Jewish council. The room was filled with religious leaders, each with strong opinions about him. Paul looked around and noticed something important. The council was divided into two groups: the Sadducees, who didn't believe in resurrection or angels, and the Pharisees, who did. Paul used this division to his advantage. He declared that he was on trial because of his belief in the resurrection. Immediately, the two groups began arguing with each other. The room erupted in chaos. The commander had to pull Paul out again to keep him safe. That night, while Paul was being kept in the fortress, he received a message that brought him comfort. The Lord stood near him and said, "Take courage. You have spoken about me in Jerusalem. You must also speak in Rome." This message gave Paul strength. It showed him that his journey wasn't over. It showed him that the trials he faced were part of a larger plan. The next morning, a group of more than 40 men formed a plot. They made a vow not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. They asked the religious leaders to request another meeting with Paul so they could ambush him. But Paul's nephew heard about the plan. He went to the fortress and told Paul. Paul then asked a soldier to take the boy to the commander. When the commander heard the warning, he acted quickly. He gathered 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen. In the middle of the night, they escorted Paul out of the city. They took him to a city called Caesarea, where the Roman governor lived. In Caesarea, Paul faced several trials. First, he stood before the governor Felix. The Jewish leaders came from Jerusalem to accuse him. They brought a lawyer to present their case. Paul defended himself calmly. He explained that he hadn't broken any laws and that the accusations were based on misunderstandings and hostility. Felix didn't find Paul guilty, but he kept him in prison for 2 years. During this time, Felix often called Paul to speak with him. He seemed curious, but he waited for a bribe that never came. After Felix was replaced by another governor named Festus, Paul faced a new trial. The Jewish leaders wanted Paul transferred back to Jerusalem, hoping to ambush him along the way. But Paul knew the danger. He used his Roman right to appeal to Caesar. This meant he had to be sent to Rome to have his case heard. Festus agreed, and Paul's journey to Rome began. Before he left, King Agrippa visited Festus. Festus asked Agrippa to help him understand Paul's case. Paul stood before the king and told his story again. Agrippa listened closely. When Paul finished, Agrippa said that Paul could have been set free if he hadn't appealed to Caesar. But the decision had already been made. Paul boarded a ship with other prisoners. The journey to Rome was long and dangerous. The weather turned violent. A terrible storm hit. The ship was tossed like a toy on the waves. The sailors were terrified. They didn't know if they would survive. But Paul stood up and encouraged them. He said no one would die because God had promised he would reach Rome. His calm voice brought comfort in the middle of terror. After 2 weeks at sea, the ship ran aground on the island of Malta. The people on the island welcomed them. They built a fire to warm the travelers. As Paul gathered sticks for the fire, a snake bit his hand. The islanders thought he would die, but he simply shook the snake into the fire and kept working. When he didn't fall ill, the people were amazed. They listened to him, and he healed many of the sick on the island. After winter passed, Paul and the others boarded another ship and traveled to Rome. When they arrived, Paul was placed under house arrest. He wasn't locked in a prison cell. He rented a small house, but he was guarded and couldn't leave. Even so, he welcomed visitors. He taught openly. He explained the message of Jesus to anyone who came. For 2 years, he lived like this, teaching, writing, and strengthening believers. The Bible doesn't describe Paul's final moments, but many early writers say he was eventually executed in Rome during the rule of Emperor Nero. They say he faced death with courage. They say he stayed faithful until the end. His life ended quietly, but his legacy was anything but quiet. Paul's journey from Jerusalem to Rome shows how far he was willing to go for the truth he believed in. He faced crowds, councils, storms, prisons, and plots against his life. But he kept going. He kept speaking. He kept teaching. His story shows that faith isn't always easy. It isn't always safe, but it can change history. Paul's life ended in Rome, far from the streets of Tarsus where he grew up, and far from the road where everything changed. He didn't leave behind a home full of treasure. He didn't leave behind statues or temples built in his honor. He left something far more powerful. He left communities. He left teachings. He left letters filled with hope, guidance, and truth. He left a story that would shape the world for centuries. When people talk about Paul today, they don't usually remember the tents he made or the miles he walked. They remember the words he wrote and the lives he touched. His letters are still read in homes, churches, schools, prisons, hospitals, and quiet rooms where people search for direction. His story offers something that feels personal, no matter who you are or where you come from. One of the most important parts of Paul's legacy is his message of grace. Paul knew what it meant to make mistakes. He knew what it meant to be wrong. He knew what it meant to hurt others. His early life was filled with actions he later regretted. But he didn't let his past define his future. He believed that people could change. He believed forgiveness was real. He believed nobody was beyond hope. This message still speaks to people who feel unworthy or ashamed. It reminds them that their story isn't over. Another part of Paul's legacy is his teaching about community. He didn't want believers to live isolated lives. He encouraged them to support one another, to share meals, to help the weak, to comfort the hurting, and to celebrate the joyful moments together. He described the community as a body made up of many parts, each part different, each part important. This picture still helps people understand how to live with unity, even when they come from different backgrounds and cultures. Paul also taught that faith should be practical. He didn't want people to only speak about kindness. He wanted them to show kindness. He didn't want them to only talk about forgiveness. He wanted them to forgive. He didn't want them to only know the right words. He wanted them to live them out. His letters are full of simple instructions that still feel relevant today. Be patient. Be humble. Be gentle. Help those in need. Encourage those who feel tired. These are not complicated ideas. They are everyday actions that bring light into dark places. Paul's legacy also includes his courage. He faced danger in almost every chapter of his life: angry crowds, harsh leaders, storms, prison cells, false accusations, betrayal, and long periods of isolation. But he continued. He didn't run away from responsibility. He didn't hide his beliefs when they became unpopular. He didn't let fear silence him. This courage inspires people who face challenges of their own. It shows that strength doesn't always come from physical power. It often comes from conviction, purpose, and hope. Another reason Paul's story still matters is the way he bridged worlds. He brought together Jews and Gentiles. He spoke to rulers and prisoners. He connected people who had nothing in common. He showed that faith could unite different cultures without erasing their identities. This part of his legacy speaks directly to our world today, where differences sometimes divide people. Paul showed that unity is possible when people focus on what truly matters. Paul's teachings about love are maybe the most quoted and remembered. His description of love in his letter to the Corinthians still moves people today. He didn't describe love as a feeling. He described it as an action. Something you choose, something you practice, something you commit to even when it's difficult. This view of love has shaped relationships, families, friendships, and communities for generations. His legacy also includes honesty. Paul didn't pretend to be perfect. He admitted when he felt weak. He wrote about moments when he felt overwhelmed. He said there were times when he didn't understand his own actions. This honesty makes him relatable. It makes him human. It shows that faith doesn't remove struggle. It helps people face struggle with hope. Paul's life also reminds us that purpose often grows out of unexpected moments. He never planned to become a missionary. He never planned to travel across the Roman Empire. He never planned to write letters that would outlive him by thousands of years. His purpose came from a moment he didn't expect, a light on the road, a voice calling his name, a truth that broke through his certainty. Many people today still experience moments that shift their lives. Paul's story reminds us that these moments can lead to something greater than we imagine. Another reason Paul's story matters is that it shows the power of transformation. The man who once breathed threats became a man who breathed encouragement. The man who once tried to destroy became a man who built. The man who once used force became a man who used words filled with compassion. This transformation is at the heart of his legacy. It shows that change is possible. It shows that people are not trapped by their past. It shows that one encounter, one truth, one new beginning can rewrite an entire life. Finally, Paul's legacy matters because it shaped the foundation of Christianity as we know it. Without Paul's journeys, the message might have stayed small and local. Without his letters, many early communities might have struggled without guidance. Without his courage, the movement might have stalled under pressure. His influence helped carry the message across cities, across cultures, across centuries. Paul never saw the full impact of his work. He didn't live to see how far his letters would travel. He didn't see how many people his words would touch. But that is often how legacy works. The seeds we plant today grow long after we are gone. Paul planted seeds in towns and households, in hearts and minds. And those seeds became communities, teachings, and traditions that have lasted for thousands of years. His story is not just the story of one man. It is the story of change, courage, community, and grace. It is the story of how a life can turn in a new direction and inspire millions. And it is a story that still speaks today. As Paul sat under house arrest in Rome, his life had slowed compared to the years he spent walking across cities and climbing rough hillsides. The noise of crowds was replaced by quieter conversations. The constant movement of his missionary journeys was replaced by the slow rhythm of guarded days. Yet even in this stillness, Paul's mind remained active. His heart remained focused. His purpose remained strong. Visitors came often. Some were young leaders seeking guidance. Some were believers who wanted to hear his teaching in person. Some brought news from distant churches. Paul listened carefully to every word. He wrote letters when he could, knowing they might be the last messages some communities would receive from him. He encouraged them to stay united. He reminded them to hold on to hope. He urged them to stay away from arguments that drained their energy and from fears that weakened their faith. Paul seemed to sense the end of his life drawing near. In one of his final letters, he wrote that he had fought the good fight. He felt he had completed the race set before him. This wasn't a statement of pride. It was a peaceful acceptance. He had lived fully. He had given everything. He had held nothing back. His final reflections show gratitude rather than regret. They show calm rather than fear. He trusted that his work would continue through the communities he had nurtured. When the time came for Paul's execution, early writers say he faced it with dignity. There were no crowds cheering him this time. There was no courtroom debate. There was no dramatic scene. Just a quiet ending to a life that had carried so much noise, movement, and meaning. Paul left the world without riches or monuments, but he left a legacy written not in stone, but in hearts and lives. Today, people still read his letters for guidance. They still study his journeys for inspiration. They still repeat his teachings at weddings, funerals, baptisms, and gatherings of every kind. His life continues to shine because it wasn't built on power or wealth. It was built on hope. Paul's story invites us to ask one more question. What part of his journey speaks to you the most? Is it his transformation, his courage, his honesty, his love for community, or his willingness to follow truth even when it cost him everything? Each listener will carry something different from his life. That is the beauty of a story like Paul's. It meets people where they are. It offers something real. And it reminds us that purpose, once discovered, can echo long after we are gone.